We certainly welcome everyone to the meeting tonight. We've been away for a while, and so we'll have quite a few things we can look at tonight. Before we get started, I'll ask Paul to say a prayer and say our pledge.
Please. Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful day, for our beautiful city. Please be with the Airport Commission and city officials as we listen and deliberate, make decisions to the betterment of our airport and our community. Please guide us with prudence and wisdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we're going back to January for minutes that we need approval on. Anybody see any corrections that we need to make? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve minutes.
Motion?
Second.
Have a second. I guess we'll still call a roll on that.
Shelby Hutton.
Yay.
Ken Lowry. Who's not here? Never mind. Paul Myers.
Here.
Bill Shacklet. Aye. Drew Shelley. Yay. Valeska Starnes.
Yay.
Steve Waldron.
Yay. All right, item number 4, Chad, update on Taxway F development.
All right, Benson is also here to talk a little bit about this, but we are looking at the development of Taxway Foxtrot, and we've tasked Barge with a couple of things. First task or first work authorization is to really look at this first area, kind of a phase 1 to get the stormwater and utilities and things like that. And then the second work authorization that they have, and that's strictly with the airport, is to look at the development of this airport, of this area of the airport, and put it into different phases, and also attach dollar amounts to it as to how we could develop it so that we can plan for budgets and things like that down the road. So they've also looked at, the big mystery has always been that 5 acres kind of on the west side there as to how to deal with that. So Benson and his team have put together a couple of plans here for us to look at, and so I'll have Benson describe those for you, and then you can have any questions or anything like that. He'll take care of it.
Yeah, so on a snowy day, was that in February or March? I can't remember if it was February, early March. Steve and Chad drove to Nashville and had a good ride, probably because nobody was on the roads, but we discussed the options that we have. So we've got the 2 projects kind of running right now. One, like Chad said, is the grading and drainage. The second is the layout of what we think things are going to look at. So those are separate projects, however, they hinge a lot on each other. So as far as this drawing goes, there's kind of 2 areas or 3 areas, if you will. We've got the area to the west of TDK at the top. We've got the majority of the ball fields, and then the 5 acres that was kind of additionally added. So what we had to really pin down in order to get the grading and drainage done this meeting.
Yes.
All right, I get to. So what we needed to pin down was this area here, so we could get our grading and drainage package done. So when we met, we came up with a couple of things and a couple of ways to make this work into some of the preliminary work we had already done. The biggest thing is the utility corridor is going to run down this taxiway and then heads back over through this. And this is the water, the power, and then our drainage are these structures that you see going out into this area to our drainage basin here. So the drawing that we came up with was a couple of different sizes of hangars here, 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 here. That'll give you some different view box hangars, more for your people that want to have their own hangar, maybe a business, whatnot. We also still wanted to account for T-hangers because we know that you've got a large T-hanger waiting list. So we came up with this mix here. And of course, this is more of the corporate business that's kind of fixed by the size of the lots that are up there as well. So we feel that we've got a pretty good handle on this area here. The 5 acres is still open for discussion. It's going to be farther down the road before we get there. Do you have the other drawing? Click.
Yep. And there I tried to just put it on top of that area, just so you can kind of see how it.
Yeah, and so
it
this
may not
one,
be perfect.
this one was more following along the road. We do have some dead space. Anyway, we looked at it, we're going to have some empty space somewhere. But as you can see, this is how this comes in. We eventually, when MTSU kind of firms up what they want to do, we will have some more area for hangars in this area as well. So there's still some potential for more work in that area. Another option for the 5 acres was to square everything up with the runway. Once again, this has got an additional pass-through taxiway, so you don't have as much of a choke point. We would have to access and get onto the taxiway system in order to have cars get to certain areas. But these are the two we looked at. Like I said, this area is not so much dependent on what we're doing today. And I think Chad kind of drew it on this as well. But you can see we have more green space down here with this area. But that's where we are on that. We're working through updating the grading right now to match this layout, and hope to have that ready to bid sometime in the late April, early May timeframe.
Let's point out a few other things if somebody has not had a chance to really go over the drawing. Chad, go ahead and highlight kind of the first building that would be the T-hangars, and the fact that we are planning on putting a restroom in the end of it.
Yes.
That would service anything else. So that would more than likely be the first T-hanger building that could be built. I think in what our first phase of Benson's proposed, I'll call it sewer, drainage, and so forth, layout, kind of show that perimeter one more time of what you could encompass with that first phase,
So
Benson.
the first phase is going to have everything from here, through here, and down to here.
So it allows basically to build, I'm going to say approximately 6 box hangars. We actually have somebody that's been talking with Chad that's pretty serious about one of the, I'm going to call it an FBO building there at the top. And so, as we all know, as already been mentioned, we've got a big waiting list for T-hangars. So once we can get this thing actually out and on paper and get this thing going, you kind of seem to think that we're also going to be able to get some funding from the city to put some of these buildings in as well.
Yes, we'd work out a finance plan with a debt retirement that would go through the collection of those revenues from that to retire that debt. But then, once that first initial term is completed, you're looking at some very excellent revenue for the airport fund and then improvements and everything. And what's really great about this plan is this phase one is you've got a little bit of everything. You've got box hangars, you've got T-hangars, you've got some serious hangars up here if you're bringing in a big company. And this discussion here is just to add something besides like the bathroom that we have down in the T-hangars, but an actual bathroom and maybe a little waiting area. Give these folks, because they're going to be paying some top dollars for these T-hangars, a little bit of a room where there's snack machines, something like that they can sit. And maybe it's where a family waits for the airplane to get pulled out, whatever, wait for some weather. We've got that capability right there.
Any questions from anyone?
What size aircraft can go in the hangars up at the top?
The top, those are 150 by 100s. So we're looking at the tail heights to determine what's going to get most of the fleet that we would need. The goal would be there is if one is leased out and the other one is built and not leased out, maybe that the city has control over it. And if you've got the larger aircraft that come and stay overnight sometimes and they need a place to go, they can go in one of those hangars.
Benson, how sure are we, and I know you're sure, I'm just curious, how sure are we that our current storm drainage system can handle all of this water that we're creating?
All that's had to be calculated.
Yeah.
Models have been run,
Yeah.
and then it goes to the city for approval where we're tying into their system.
Okay,
So there's a lot of approvals have been, that's one of the reasons it's kind of been taking so long is.
yeah, and all that's done already?
Yes.
But there's really two studies here. There's two firms that have worked on this. Originally Adkins, after the airport master plan, they did an initial drawing for us and did initial grading and design of the stormwater. Now, that did not include the 5 acres. So now you bring in another 5 acres, another large area. So, and then, looking 10 years later at the layout, what kind of hangars do we need? That changed. So that's what Benson and his crew have been doing is, okay, the first plan had a lot of T hangars.
Yeah.
You already have 100-some T hangars on the south end. Do you really need another 80? So this is 40?
40. So our thought process behind that is some of these boxes on the front might free up some of the T hangars. You might have one or two go in and move in there. So we would have some new possible tenants in the T hangars and then start out with 10 more new hangars to bring 10 more people here.
And our calculations for the stormwater was always based on all those soccer fields being pavement.
Okay.
So
it's
that
already prepared
calculation,
for that.
yes. And there's so how that works is right in this area is a retention area.
Yeah.
Which then spills into another retention area off of DeJarnett, which then goes under DeJarnett into, I forget which creek that is, but it goes eventually into a creek.
And
Right.
we did go back and look for some areas to put, it's not, I don't want to call it green space, but it is grass. But you can see the little white areas at the end of the T hangars around this parking in the area, and then behind those hangars, it's just unusable space for anything else. So it's going to be it'll be turf and allow for some more runoff and some surface drainage as well.
Okay.
Okay, so when you're saying the drainage going over towards Desjardins, are you talking about still on our property? On this property?
It goes
Over
into
there
that-
in that back corner?
It goes to that drainage basin, then it goes out, and then just keeps going.
It's all kind of a time release.
Okay.
And then, kind of assisting with this whole thing is if you look at the Swanson property, they made some huge improvements to that area too, where Bradford Place would always flood during big rain events like we just had this weekend. A lot of what they did there on that property helps that whole system as well. So I'm hoping that we don't see that same type of flooding situation that we've had in the past based on some of these improvements that have been made in neighboring properties.
Yeah, it obviously causes concern because that's all residential over there and you don't want to have a bunch of people upset
Right.
if things are,
We only use a small area of that retention area off of DeJarnett. That whole area could fill up between the fence line and the end of the.
well, and it's
runway.
gotten better,
Yeah.
it's gotten way better, but I
Yeah,
don't want to upset the neighbors.
right, yeah.
All right, good comments. Anything else?
No, we're working on the obstruction. We're in the analysis phase and working on that as we speak, and hope to have something to share with you guys before too long on that.
You don't need a decision on that 5 acre area today.
You need us to,
No, we can get started with what we're doing, and eventually when we decide we get to that point, we can start looking.
A key, to me, a key item was that, we designed that whole thing with just the front soccer fields on there, not the 5 acres. Now, all of a sudden, we have the 5 acres. How do we drain that? And in talking with Jeff Redmill and all them, the sewer lines that are going in between here and reaching this area are at a depth that we can continue it on to the west, hit those key areas in the 5 acre, and still drain those areas as well. So we're not up against the surface with those sewer, or those stormwater lines.
Yeah, the shallowest areas that we run into are up closer to the runway.
So the road will still continue to go up towards MTSU and then along the tree line and connect back over to like Chick-fil-A Lane?
Right. Now, we would really like to do something here with Walmart. That would save us a whole lot of work here if we could do this, because part of the problem that we're running into is naturally you'd want to save as much of this 5 acres as you can, so you put this road here. Well, that creates a really bad intersection right there if you've got another road right there. So you've got to really put that road down a ways here. So that kind of can break up your development and waste the property to get that road so you can maintain your circulation around the area. So that's another part of this that we'll be working out.
All right, Vincent, thank you.
Thank you.
Chad, looks like it's already time for budget talk again.
Yeah, so just kind of an update as we go into that. The federal contract tower, the grant status is, there's been some real tough discussions the last couple weeks. And one FAA group, the federal contract tower people, are telling us to do the survey work, provide that work to the FAA for them to do their siting analysis. Then, once they have figured out what site it is, to do the environmental for that site. So we've applied for a grant with the state aeronautics, and aeronautics has a checklist. And one of the items on the checklist is to do the environmental. Well, you can't do the environmental until you have the site. So there's no grant allowed until we would basically have to pay for everything up front, and then once we have that site and we've done the environmental, then we can ask for the grant. So this was a question that was up several months ago when we were on the phone with the FAA and aeronautics on board. So I started to make some calls to the ADO and all that, just kind of say, this is kind of crazy. We're not trying to shirk not doing an environmental, but we can't really do an environmental until we know what site it is. So the latest that has come back is that the state has said you can do 1 Cat X, which is the lowest level of environmental, 1 Cat X on all 3 sites. And that's what they're going to pay for. And this is different than they told us the first time. It's different than they told us the second time. Barge has been given the go-ahead to do it this way, so we're going to do it and see what happens. But it's just, which comes first, chicken or egg? And I feel like we're chasing our tails half the time on that, because one group's telling you one thing and another's telling you another. So maybe we've resolved that problem. Approach mitigation, NV5 information, Barge is still going through that. They've pretty much identified all the 20-to-1 approach area has been determined. Now they're going deeper into all that information, all that data that NV5 has given us to identify the trees that are in the 34-to-1, not an issue, but are growing out of the 34-to-1 to approach the 20-to-1 in a 5 to 10 year period. So, it's one thing to think about this project in that it doesn't cure everything for all the time. For years to come, there's going to be these trees that are going to be growing, and I think that's where we go back to our height limitations around the airport, and we deal with it on a property by property basis, or in some cases, we may have already been on that property and bought a navigation easement. So we've got some different tools then in the future to deal with, and it won't be as big of an issue with this big sweeping project that we're going to be doing. Fuel farm is in operation. We're still working out some little things here and there. You won't really notice it. It's just internal stuff and some improvements to some of the facility there, some steps that will be put in place so that customers won't hopefully not trip over the curb and things like that. RPZ property, we did get some notification from the state. They were wanting some forms for a fill out that we'd requested assistance for the purchasing of those properties. So it sounds like it's moving forward, but won't know here, and I guess for a few weeks until we hear what what is included in the new budget for the state. Aeronautics informed us that now they're considering funding the RPZ. If we put 50% of our money down, that they might be able to assist with some of that now. So again, another change in how they're funding things and all that. But with their point system that they're using to judge which projects get funded at all, again, this is one of those situations now where that funding of 5% or 10% local just isn't going to happen, but you can get some extra points if you fund it at 50% level. So keep that in mind. I think that's going to be coming into play not only for RPZs but other projects that we'll be doing. It's similar to what we have in our road system and things like that for state funding. Oftentimes it's 50 to 60% funded locally, and the rest, 50 or 40%, is state or federal fund, from what I understand. So recap, we've invested pretty heavily, the city's invested pretty heavily in the airport. The terminal building is just now coming up on 5 years old. That's about a $5 million project. The hangar number 1 there with Mike Jones was a joint state and city economic development project. And, Mike is now, that economic model where he had about 15 employees before that, now he has up to 30 employees. So that's working exactly like we said it would. The fuel farm is an economic development project. We were able to increase our flow of vehicles in and out of, around in front of the terminal with some money that was left over by the terminal. The blast pad at the end of the runway was also another kind of economic development type project paid for by the city. No state or federal funding on that portion of the project. Our paving is completed for the most part, except for a few smaller areas there that we've discussed. That was basically a federal, state, and local project. And now we've been talking a little bit about preparing hangar pads on the north end. Any type of pavement that we do and hangar pad development is a city project. Once we start to get into hangar development, the city will assist us, but we've got to pay that revenue back to them to cover the debt service. Tower most likely will be another project that is an economic development project. So just keep in mind, what we used to do with the federal and state government to take to city council with 90-10 is really, we're seeing it here locally already in the last 5 years, and it's really not going to be happening in the future as we move forward. So that's kind of a picture I wanted to give you prior to going into the budget. So remember that general aviation airports have 2 sources of income, the fuel sales and leases. And I thought we'd start out with you've seen this graph before, this is something that we've been building through time, and it really shows the increase in our avgas sales through time, and then also our Jet A in red. The gold is the total fuel sales, and you really see that take off post-COVID 2021, 2022. 2024 is when we did the runway work, paving work, and things like that. So that's where the dip comes. But I also added the fuel sales profit. And this really showed up, I think, really nicely on the graphics, because prior to 2022, we had a price schedule for our fuel that was, we pretty much had not made very little change to it for the last 10 years or so. But the Airport Commission made a change there, and you can really see what that did to help fuel sales profit increase and go towards funding projects here at the airport. It's substantial. So in the revenue section of the budget, I wanted to point out a few things. The city made a change in our banking, and we're seeing a huge increase from $28 in interest in 2023 to almost $50,000 in 2026. So that's really huge. And I know the Airport Commission for decades was talking about what could we do with the money that we had in savings, and you're really seeing some interest growing finally here and benefiting the airport. This is huge for us. part of this transfer in general fund, this is where we see the general fund and CIP monies that come into the airport fund for projects on the expense side and to take care of the expenses, and here it is on the front end on the revenue side, so it really balances itself out. Another real positive here is what you're seeing in the use of the business center and the revenues that we're receiving. We're really looking at around $46,000 this year in revenue off the business center. So that's just rentals of this facility throughout the year. So that's really great. That's another great positive for us, another area where this airport can generate some revenue. Next year, we'll be taking over the classroom on that end, so we're really not sure what that'll do, so we added a little bit of funding to that, but again, that could be another huge increase for us. The downside here is this is where we get into that period of transition where the MTSU lease is at around $117,000, $118,000. The classroom goes away, that's $48,000 that leaves. So now we're down to around $72,000 in MTSU revenue. That shouldn't change much after this. This will go up by its calculated 3%, but we did lose that rental area. Let me go back. As part of this calculation too in revenue, I did want the Airport Commission to take a look at just operating expenses. So in this, I took out the transfer for general fund for anything that was taking care of projects and any of this federal or state grants. Everything else is pretty operational and is what the revenues that we get from this airport. So there's $4 million here that is generated just on a regular basis for this airport, and you can see that's pretty consistent over the last few years. After expenses, then we'll actually see the operating revenue or loss. So the expenses, I'm going to highlight a few items in there. Salaries did change, and this is part of being a part of the city structure. We've had an increase in salaries across the board, kind of starting with our emergency services, our police and fire, but that has impacted the entire city employee thing, including the airport. And that, according to Aaron Tucker, is about a $25,000 hit to the airport for salaries. This is for full-time. Next on the expense side is solid waste. Now we're changing from the little bins that we have out in front of Hangar 3, and we'll be using our dumpster area by Whataburger. There was some discussion of us taking over all the dumpsters in the area here. Mike has one out by his hangar. We're thinking of maybe taking over that so that our folks in the T hangars have a place to put material, put their trash and everything like that, and just work out that deal with them and lease, share that expense with Mike Jones. We also thought about doing the same with Jim and Murfreesboro Aviation. So this number is a little high. I hope that there'd be an exchange in revenue, but we aimed high, so expect that to go down, but we went conservative there. Professional services is always a high number. There's always, as we're doing development, there always seems to be a lot of need for various surveys and things like that. And Ryan's going to talk to you a little bit right now on, as we talk about our revenues and the appropriate amounts to charge folks, one of the key items that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of years is the MTSU facilities. What rent do we charge for that? And then even as we develop the north end, what is the appropriate rent for airport? So Ryan has had some discussions with probably one of the leading folks in that area, and he can share with you an estimate that he has received to talk about those key areas of the airport. If you want to cover that.
So about $24,000 of that professional services budget is to a company owned by a gentleman named Michael Hodges. He is a sort of an industry expert when it comes to aeronautical market rent analysis and property assessments. I think all of us here probably know how important a property assessor is. It's just aviation is an extremely niche version of it. So you can't just go to any other real estate agent in the area and expect them to know aviation. So this particular gentleman has worked at airports all over the country, major ones from Atlanta, Honolulu, all sorts of various ones. So he's going to help us identify some particular, for example, just like square footage of how much we would like to or should expect out of the MTSU spaces, or in different options, such as if a tenant wanted to tear down a building, build something new. Same for the new development that we were talking about earlier. We can get various options of what we could expect for just raw land that's got to get developed, or what we can shoot for of a finished hangar that the city is trying to build for us. So we'll get various sort of square footage price deals of what we can shoot for.
You're saying we are paying this guy $24,000 already, or just talking about it?
Just talking about it.
He hasn't been paid. That's not till next fiscal.
One of the problems with like appraisals that we've done appraisals on the soccer fields. We've talked to, we'll get two to verify that rent. And part of the problem is they'll look and they'll say, well, how close is it to Highway 231? Well, it's right there, but look at how close it is to the runway, and they really don't have a comparison, for the type of people that are doing our appraisals. Is there something that can, a little bit more of an aviation side that might help us in that argument? Part of our other discussion on this is when it comes down to rents on these hangars, it's like, well, how much money does it take to build this hangar, and when can you retire that debt? And then you kind of work your way into what that monthly rent is going to be over what is your term that you want to pay that off in. But is there something special that we need to look at aviation? I'm not asking for your approval on that. We're going to come back to that. But we've got this number built in the budget just to look at that. It could be a tool that could help us. We can look into that a little bit further. That just give us a little bit of a heads up. That's the uniqueness of being at an airport versus just being on another property along a state highway or something. Repair, furnishing and machinery. This one is, Kim?
Heavy equipment.
Heavy equipment and,
That's a
oh,
generators.
no, AV equipment. We have, so now we're getting into 5 years of all this equipment, and we're starting to see some things go offline and having to repair or fix it. So we have gotten a quote from AVI, the company that put this in, to maintain the whole facility, and it's around $35,000 just to do the maintenance. So IT is looking into this, but we thought we better budget this. This may be one of those things that we look to general funds, so many other departments use this equipment, the TV cameras, things like that. So again, I budgeted high, knowing that this is something we do need to have some sort of maintenance agreement with this equipment. I can't go to really any other company because it's so specialized. AVI has put in their equipment, so it's something that we're just having to cover, and hopefully we can work through some agreement on that. Software, yeah.
Let me interrupt you just a second. So speaking of equipment, how old is our big tractor at Batwing?
That is, it's over 20 years old. And so this year, the state has programmed us to get a new tractor and cutter. And our maintenance expenses on the tractor has really gotten quite expensive, and getting parts has been difficult
So
too.
you won't have to put that as a line item then in the budget?
Yes, it is. It'll be under the fixed assets.
Okay.
And I'll show you how that's being funded and everything as well. Software subscriptions, just the more we get into different programs, the more you have to keep those up. Supply for resale is around $2,600,000 for purchasing of avgas and Jet A. So looking at then all of our expenses versus our revenue, you can see that over the last couple of years, we're around $200-some thousand that we've actually been to the good. And again, this year, I'm just being very conservative as to where we could go. Fuel sales, I kept a little bit low, but that could change pretty easily to get us back into the positive again. The fixed assets, and this is summary of all the projects, so I'm going to go to a breakdown and then I'll come back to that. But what we're taking care of this year is the runway 36 threshold relocation and pavement project. That's pretty much done. The approach mitigation, some of that is going to happen this fiscal year and then bleed into next fiscal year. Taxiway utility and hangar development, there's some of that going on now. Most of that will occur as we get into construction and things like that. And you can see what I'm breaking this down to is federal funding, state funding, local, which is airport, and then our CIP and general fund is what is covering those items. So federal contract, tower, siding, and environmental. This is currently what's the grant that we're putting in place is federal NPE money and state, and our local share, which is going through CIP, I believe. Airport sign will probably go in July. That'll go up for bid now, but probably be constructed and paid for in the beginning of FY26. And then here's the tractor and cutter, which will be through a government surplus deal type thing, where the state actually provides us around $60,000, and it looks like for a four-wheel drive tractor and a large 16-foot batwing type thing cutter, it's around $120,000 through government sales type thing. So when we break it down, the airfield is around $1.3 million. Building improvements, which is the contract tower studies, and machinery is around 120, and 80 is the sign for other. So that's where that comes from. And then you can kind of see then what our profit and loss is through the year, what we expect. And you can see it fluctuates each year with, for 2023, we actually came out on top, but we are taking losses in 24 and 25, and it looks like possible loss in 2026 as well. Does anybody have any questions on all those lines of budget line items? So, again, back to the general aviation, the two sources of income are fuel sales and leases. So you addressed the fuel sales a few years ago, and you can see the benefit of that. The state used to fund site prep for hangars and construction, and that really helped divert some of the cost of hangars. 2015, when the FedEx bill came in, it pretty much went away. So Aeronautics did an airport economic impact study in 2019, prior to COVID. And it was, as you know, it was very impactful, and it was a great tool for us. Now, there was a lot of information that was gathered there from the airports. Now, not all the airports, though, provided all their T-hangar rental rates. So it was very difficult to go back and use that study to look at and compare T-hangar rents. So, again, TAC, the Tennessee Aeronautics Commission, mainly George was on the forefront of this one, was trying to get, if we're having all these expenses and we're having difficulty having state and federal funding, we need to generate some revenue. And all the airports have hangar waiting lists, but we can't get past, stop dead zero there if we can't generate some revenue. So we got to free it up somehow. And Aeronautics liked the idea. They liked the idea of trying to find some money to do site prep again, but the but is, they said, you can't be giving away the hangars like you have been. So there are some airports that have just, kept it at $75 for a T-hangar for decades and not gotten anywhere near your market value, which is a grant assurance that we have to follow. So they went back to Kimley Horn and asked them to do a T-hangar rent program. So they came up with a very sophisticated formula, and the formula looked at whether it's a T-hangar or a box hangar or some sort of plane port type of situation. Looked at its age, looked at if it had electricity, did it have sliding doors, did it have bifold doors, if it was located in a good spot on the hangar, or on the airport, if it was a good location or not, what were the other criteria? And then what are your costs to maintain it? Utilities, repairs, insurance. So we took all that into consideration, and you can put that into each type of hangar that you have. So we broke it down into these 7 areas here, and saw how we scored. And what the result is a range from a standard rate to a suggested rate, and then I added a midpoint just to give us some sort of another target there. On A, B, and C, we were below the suggested range there. And standard rate to suggested rate, and the suggested rate is what they considered you're paying for yourself and covering your local share for projects. That's where you want to be. So A, B, and C, we were short. 233 is our current rent there. And that's a 4-panel 1952 hangar, barely with electricity in it. D&E, again, 1976 type hangars. We were in range, but on the low side, below midpoint, around at $300 a month. F&H, now we're getting into the erected tubes that were in 1998. Now we're getting closer to mid-range at $320, mid-range is $342. IK&L are a bifold door with insulation on the top, electricity, 2008 model, $388. So we're almost right there, close to midpoint in the suggested range. And then I did take a look at those hangars that face the west, and I put them as a hangar that's less desirable because they don't have a lot of space there for ramp. And again, it was close. You can see the range changed a little bit. It came down from 508 to 42, 381. So we were a little bit above the midpoint. We were close to midpoint there. And then G and J, we were at market value at 498 and 516. So I did give you a little bit of a breakdown on how close we were, or how far off we were from midpoint, and then how far we're off from suggested rate. Now, this is not a be-all model. There was things that are missing in their great formula that they had, such as square footage. They also took into account the county that each of these airports serves. So each county has an economic type strength or score to it. So that was taken into account as well. You know, you got your Metro Nashville area versus more rural area. That was taken into account for this formula. Do you have any questions or comments on that? So, looking at our budget, given kind of where we're going, what we see as far as funding was concerned, my recommendation for this year's budget was to increase. Last year we were at 4%, this year to go 5%. And this, what I show in the blue is where we hit then in these ranges. And we go from 233 to 245 for A, B, and C, 315 to D and E, 346 for F and H, I, J, K is 407, I and L West is 394, G and J is 523 and 542. And then we would also extend that into the tie downs and our corporate boxes as well, for the one corporate box 4 that isn't on a long-term lease agreement. There's, for our big hangars, our corporate box hangars, you know, we have long-term agreements there that are at, most of them are at 4%. I think MTSU is the only one still at 3%. So we can't really change that. So this is what is left. And again, this is based on a little bit of this formula and the need, and I see the need for us to continue to generate more our revenue to be able to make these improvements because the state and federal funding is just not going to be there, or it's going to be very hard to get. We're going to have to put in not 5% or 10%, but 50%. We're relying on the city a lot. So I felt like, and no pressure has been put on me or sent to me in any type of memo, but this is part of that partnership that we have with the city to do our part in being able to fund ourselves. I think if we continue to generate good revenue, we can make these improvements, we can participate in these programs, and then the fruits of that labor can go back then into participating more in the, single aircraft owner type of operations, the supporting and advocating for general aviation. But this is really a business decision that I think we're facing right now, and all the airports across the state are going to be facing.
Chad, looks like you've got a $10 difference just in F and H. Is it going to be the 346 or the 336? You've got both.
Oh, I'm sorry, 336. That's just a typo here.
Okay.
Oops. But I'll make that change. Sorry about that.
If you're saying it's fair market value on the other two, why would you go up?
And that's a fair point. The fair market value is going to increase each year too, at some percent. If you go to CPI, 3%, 2.8. Do you want to keep your hangars all moving in the same direction, or do you want to drop those down a little bit? I think that's something that the Airport Commission could discuss.
I have a question, and kind of to Shelby's point. If some are closer to a midpoint or fair market value, does it need to be a standard 4 or 5% adjustment across the board, or should we have a little bit larger increase on, say, like A, B, and C to get them closer to a midpoint or fair market value than other hangars?
Yeah, and A, B, and C, it surprised me that we were completely off range. I knew we would probably be low on that, just given the situation, the condition of those hangars. If anybody's been in those hangars, those hangars are, they were built on dirt and then paved and put concrete in later. The 4-panel doors are horrible. Those are some hangars that we will be looking for and looking at seriously when we do the airport layout plan to say, when do we replace those, or what do we do with that area?
So you think your scale's off then on that?
I would say that I think if the Aeronautics Division questioned us on it, I'd love to show it to them and say, this is not good. I would say that the T hangars at Smyrna that were plopped down just onto the ramp are probably, I don't know where that hits, but those are horrible conditions and would not be on this range. Aeronautics, when we were getting trained on this model, it's a live program, so they're collecting that data. And I asked the question, are you going to be collecting this data? And they said, well, not initially, but we will be using it possibly in the future. So if we do make a request for site prep, they'll look at this range and go, well, you're way off, market value, and they could use it against you. And I could see them using it against airports for other type projects. Now that's speculation at this point, but if we do go down this road to where they start to fund site prep, this is going to be a tool. They invested in this tool for a reason, and they will use it for that.
Have you guys seen all the hangars? Have you been to all the different types here? Have you seen them?
I have.
There's a few of them that I haven't seen. I'd probably like to come out and look at those.
Sure.
They're maybe worth $233 a month.
Yeah.
That's actually appalling to raise the rent on those.
Chad, you brought up a good point, though. Can you possibly get the information from Smyrna to see what those hangars are?
I'll try, yeah.
Kind of match ours, just out of curiosity if
Yeah.
they're,
I would say A and B and C are even better than, I don't think they have any electricity, and
I would agree.
there's pipes in the ground to hold the doors in place.
Yeah.
I think.
they're pretty rough.
Chad, just to be clear, so I understand what you're saying those green ranges were given by TDOT or Tennessee Aeronautics,
Yes.
and your fear is that in the future, if we're out of range for that, they'll say we're not funding projects, is basically what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because you're not carrying your load and keeping your hangars within market rates?
Right. I think that they did stress to be in range, because I think there are probably some airports that are going to be way left of range, you know? So I think we scored well there, and it really surprised me where the ranges fell, because here we are every year adding 3%, 4%, 5% some years. Some years we didn't raise it at all, but that was because we had some very serious projects and didn't have a runway available to our customers.
You
So-
think that's something we can push back on, those ranges, if they're inaccurate?
Especially their study didn't include square footage in the county that you're in.
So exactly. So when you have IKL versus ABC, the square footage is completely different. G and J are, that's really a twin engine type aircraft hangar, and it never asked for square footage or, size. There wasn't a difference. If they give me three choices of T hangars, kind of size-wise from small, medium, large, that would have helped this format here. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is a tool. It is a tool.
Because there's several counties that have similar hangars
Right.
than us that charge way less. So, and then some that charge way more. So it's,
I have a friend that just rented a standalone hangar on Hunter Field near Franklin and Spring Hill for $110 a month. For, he'll keep it forever because that's a good deal, but
Yeah, I mean, fair market rate as opposed to this recommendation, I guess it needs to be a balance.
Well, the calculator did take your county in mind, right? We had to put in our county.
It did take into account the economic strength of the area that you're in. Like Hunter Field, that's private. Is that private? Yeah. So it's not even going to be accounted in this study.
are there other areas to cut money or?
We're always looking for that too. Yeah, I mean, like for example, one of the things that we started out with was with a janitorial supply company that was, I think they're under lawsuit at the time. We have the notices, and our crew was having to meet with them to make sure they weren't ripping us off, and we got rid of that company and have tried to go through other companies or go to Sam's and get our own stuff instead of relying on other people to save money and everywhere we can go.
Chad, I guess my concern is, we don't want to stick it to the customer
Right.
based on a study that's clearly off. So if there's a way to, renegotiate the study or show them, pictures, evidence, proof to adjust that so that we can be on the scale that's more accurate with what we actually have on the ground here.
I think, I think what we're talking about is a couple percentage points, really the difference here of where we need to be for hangar rents. Forget the range. I'm just giving you a glimpse of one study that came out that Aeronautics is hitting us with and could be used, in the future. So, I think this is where the Airport Commission could talk about, 5% really doesn't get us to across any goal lines here on this study, really. It just, my concern is that the next 3 years or so, as we go into some changes in our revenue abilities here, as we drop maybe some some fuel sales with, if MTSU starts to make more of a move. We're not going to be able to get the corporate customer or add aircraft on until the flight training really decreases. There's going to be this balance of a couple of years that it's going to drop and then increase. And I think our decision here as a business is how do we get ourselves into the best position to keep moving forward with these projects and being able to take care of our local share.
I think I'd like to see this with what it looks like with a 4% increase. I don't know if that's, if this is all automated in your Excel spreadsheet or not. Not really related, but, on the industrial side, 4% seems to be the standard now for increases. And, I don't think you can compare that to
Used to be.
airports. I don't know what airport increases are. It used to be 3%, but inflation's a lot higher now, so that's why it's 4%. So, we're even seeing 4.5%, but 5 just seems high, but again, I don't know what other airports are doing.
Some have had to, this is not new. The pressure that the state has been putting on airports is not new. It's been occurring for a few years, even without the model. And Shelbyville went through this a couple of years ago, and they were trying to raise it significantly, and it was painful. It was such a painful rate. It was in the double-digit percentage rate because they hadn't changed it in so long. When you don't change it in decades, you've got a lot of ground to make up. So what Aeronautics was telling everybody was, don't try to swallow this pill all in one big bite. You're going to have to do it over, create a plan, a financial model where you address this over, take that 3, take that 4, whatever percentage each year to get to where you're in the range or, getting to market value. So we're in a great position as far as that is concerned, I believe. But I think we're in a unique position. We have a lot of opportunities ahead of us. How do we keep that momentum going? And in this partnership that we have where we're relying less on state and federal funding, how do we do our share with the city and moving forward?
I'd like to see, or maybe some discussion about, since we've got the new fuel farm, it should be easier to fuel from past. What if we, for 2 or 3 months, 6 months, lowered fuel costs, prices to get our more transients, more base customers to use pump fuel here instead of going other places? I know we've done studies, and see if that increases our revenue by a lot.
There's a lot of people that fly out of here, that are based here, that go other places to get fuel.
A lot.
Not just because they're taking a trip. They're like, I'm going over here to get fuel.
Yeah, that's always the thing is like, no matter what we put the price at, they go, well, in Jackson, it's 20 cents cheaper. Okay, dude, well, you can fly
Well, I
to
hope
Jackson.
somebody doesn't fly all the way to Jackson, but
No, yeah, I'm just picking on an
so,
area.
also tagging on, so you said the MTSU lease comes up next year
330, well, for the classroom.
for the classroom?
That's
Okay,
$48,000.
So they're on a budget, they're only increasing 3% for their lease?
That was a 30-year lease, yeah.
And it's always at 3% for them? That kind of seems like a stick in the eye that they get just 3% and everybody else possibly gets
Or more.
more, and they're a big tenant.
Or what if you got a discount, a little bit more of a hangar customer discount on fuel to help with this increase? And let's just see, why can't we test this and see if we pump more gas?
There's two sides of that. We can do the truck discount.
And I'm
in
not
the
saying
truck,
like
and then the
5 cents,
seltzer.
but something that makes sense where you don't fly. I go to Smithville a lot and other places. Everybody Here probably does.
I think Chad, if I'm listening to what you and Ryan have prepared here, it makes a lot of sense to be positioned so that the state is aware that we are trying to do our part. And I see that that's what we're working with, and I'm glad that we're not so far off, because that would be catastrophic to try to correct. And that's my concern about not making a good change, is that we would find ourselves in just a couple of years behind the curve again, and that would be frustrating at several levels. I like the idea of, maybe some kind of fuel discount, but I do think.
So
Yeah.
Murray County, I don't know if this is current, but they were doing a 50-cent discount for a hangar customer. Gallatin was 25 cents. Lebanon's usually pretty high, but they were 10 cents.
Yeah, I think the
Argument,
rent is.
Shelby, is that you think that if we reduce the fuel
It's gone
sales,
for
increased volume would
full serve versus-
overshadow the reduction in cost?
See some folks.
I guess
pumping
what would the
more gas
delta
here.
be between that fuel savings and the increase? I mean, is there even,
That
basically, what's
savings
the
would
net result?
cut our revenue for
Not
people
if
like
we
me
did-
that always
Yeah.
bought it here.
My concern.
Well, we might get a lot more volume, though, so it might not cut our revenue.
I think we're at about 20 cents difference between full serve and base customer truck. And then there's a further discount for self-serve.
Chad, what were the specific parameters that the state utilized for putting our particular hangars into a box or a category? So what were their parameters?
Well, there were,
Especially if
there was T hangars, boxes, and that. And then it came down to year that it was built, bifold or sliding door, electricity, utilities, things like that. The county, wherever it's located,
Right.
and then your expenses. And so what we did for our expenses, and compared to the examples they gave, we were $20 per unit expenses covering insurance, utilities, and any repairs that we did. So if you're looking at A, B, and C, that's $20 per unit times 15. That's what went into the formula there.
So how do you think that the state is off as much as they are with A, B, and C?
Because it makes an assumption that a sliding door is a sliding door is a sliding door, and a bifold door is a bifold door, and this is a 4-panel door, and they make an assumption that the floor is, you created this hangar in an ideal situation, and it's not. Those are in rough.
I don't think they're comparing
situation.
apples to apples.
Right. So you take that off.
We're not making the rate decisions based on the
No, we're
green
not.
scales, though.
But
It's just
that's
a
going to
4
kind
versus
of,
5.
that's going to hurt us if they quantify that, because they're going to say, well, guys, you're $100 off
Well,
of that,
This
of
is
that
why the
type.
ranges are so wide, is because the parameters are so wide.
Right.
And also, just kind of back up what Chad was saying, is the state, of course, we all know the financial situation of aeronautics, so they are looking at any way to penalize an airport from getting a grant, because they don't have any money to give them. So this is one thing where they may say, and there's a bunch of airports out there that are charging $150 and $175 for a brand new T hangar. And it's just so off kilter. They're trying to normalize things to help the airports with some revenue, but also, 243 to 414 is a pretty wide range.
So, the reason I bring this up, sometimes you have to play the game. And so the game might even be to say that we're going to charge, 3, whatever that is on A, B, and C, but we have to give them a rebate because of X, X, and X. So I'm just saying, it's kind of all how you package what you're doing, and you may have to play the state's game in order to kind of pacify.
And I think if they came and pushed on you and said, you're not making that rate, I think you can say, well, come out here and take a look at it,
Yeah.
and you might be in a position to have an argument.
We have historically gone up 3
Yeah, I
to
mean,
5% a year.
Right.
And most airports don't go up annually.
We very rarely hit the 5. It's typically always been the 3 to 4.
Yeah. I think maybe one time.
One time, and I think I can remember the last 15, 18 years, so,
But there has been an increase every year.
yes.
So that's a,
But as what Chad was mentioning, we're one of the few in the area that hasn't really got to offer a lot of true pain to their customers, because some of them, just like Chevrolet, had clearly not gone up near what they should have done over the past 10 or 15 years. And so that's tough to stomach when somebody gets a $100 per month increase that, just to get something caught up. Chad, what are you really looking to, I'm kind of putting this aside just a minute.
Yeah.
What are you looking to get approved? Do we need to get the
So
budget
the budget,
itself?
the budget process is, we have turned in a budget right now that makes certain assumptions. We'll sit down with the budget director and some of the people in finance and go through it even with a finer tooth comb. But at some point, we've got fuel revenues associated in there. It made it judgment call on that. But then it always comes down to the T-hangers, because it's the only other area that we can change and manipulate really on there. We can do fuel discounts and see what it happens. We've put in a guesstimate at what fuel sales are going to do, but fuel prices and all kinds of things could make an impact on that.
I got one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have one more idea, just as we're kind of spitballing this, but instead of using a percentage this year, if you add $10 to the 233, you're now in range for A, B, and C. What if you just do a $10 increase across the board? So you're not
That'd be more than 4%, though.
well,
That'd be more than 4%.
for which
I'd
one?
like to just do 4%. I think 4% is
So
a good
4%,
compromise.
yeah, 4%.
If you do $10, that'd be more than 4%.
Yeah, it would.
D&E would go from 300 to 312. F&H would go from 320 to 333. IKL would go 388 to 403. G, 498 to 518. J, 516 to 537. That's 4%.
I make a motion, we increase it 4%.
And even though it says fair market value, we're on the last two.
We need to make that decision tonight. Is that what the rents?
Well, he's asking for a decision. We don't have to make a decision,
Okay.
but he's asking for one.
Chad, what's your thought on what Shelby's asking about, considering that G and J are already above and beyond everything else?
I think if you wanted to decrease that or maintain that this year, you could. Play, as you said, kind of play the game with the state.
I feel
okay,
like
so
the state,
G is paying 498?
Yes.
Currently, yes,
Okay.
498 and 516.
I gave it a gold
Jay.
star because it was market value.
I'm pretty sure with the state, if we show them, we've gone up every year. We hadn't stopped going up for 3 years over here. They're not going to have a problem.
But if we're keeping those the same, and then you're looking back at A, B, and C and still raising that 4%, and the condition of, it's still a hangar. You're thankful for a roof over your airplane. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But
There is a demand for that hangar, even though
A, B,
it
and
is
C.
cruddy. Yeah. If Ryan he could, before, in 2 minutes, could make a call and get somebody in that hangar right now.
I'll second Cannon's motion.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion before?
Clarification, is that across the board, Cannon?
Yes, I said 4%.
Any other discussion before we take a vote? Brian, call the roll.
Shelby Hutton,
I abstain.
Cannon Lowry,
Aye.
Paul Myers,
Aye.
Bill Shacklet. Bruce Shelley.
Aye.
Valeska Starnes.
Aye.
Steve Waldron.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. I know that wasn't easy, but,
We come up with some other things to.
yeah, we'll
So that, you know,
look at fuel.
You should let Ryan do a study to see how many gallons it takes at a discounted price to equal out what you're basically selling now.
It's not very much money.
Way to say, okay, we get another, 1,000 gallons per week or per month or whatever it is, then we know we can make X dollars off of that. So you might definitely make some incentive. We might do it on 2 Saturdays a month or something.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always little programs we could try.
We used to do that when we had the fly-in breakfast,
Right.
we'd issue a pretty substantial discount on those, and maybe that is a weekend price change or whatever. We can look at that and present that.
you might also want to increase ramp fees for people that are,
Yeah.
jets that are coming here. That's,
Yeah.
they're paying
Can you give
pennies
what the ramp fees are?
in comparison to
Other locations,
other
sure.
locations.
I think I saw $6,000,
Yeah.
that should be a month.
Yeah,
The charge
on
for,
the charge.
The ramp fees.
Oh,
he's
the
talking
revenue that we're pulling from it?
I mean, there's-
I can't cite the numbers off the top of my head, but we do charge substantially more for like a Group 2 aircraft than we do for, the smaller.
I think that's a good thing to look into. As far as the increase, a 4% increase, as far as, maintenance, it's just inflationary. I don't think it warrants a whole lot of, incentives. I think it's barely going to cover the increase in costs.
I mean, most of the people that are renting, FlexJet or whatever, a couple $100 or $500, on their actual bill is nothing in comparison to what we're asking our tenants to increase their monthly rent to.
We've not had any trouble collecting ramp fees or anything like that from those type
Yeah.
of corporate customers, larger aircraft coming in, and even fuel sale or no fuel sale, there's certain charges that we continue to charge for use of the facilities.
Well, I think they're used to that. They
Yeah.
go all over the world and they're paying
Right.
way more than
Yeah.
what they're paying here.
Absolutely. We didn't in the past until we got this facility and have the lounge and the coffee and the ice and all those things ready, GPUs and all that stuff ready to go for them that we didn't have in the past. So we are charging those, but we'll look at those rates.
Well, I mean, we get a ramp fee if we fly to Nashville and go to
Oh, yeah.
Signature, even in a 172, you get either a ramp fee or you
Yeah.
get a difference in charge and fuel. So we're not Nashville. I'm
No,
not
no, no,
saying
no.
that, but I'm just saying it doesn't matter if you're corporate or if you're a 172.
Right.
All right, Jay.
Next Airport Commission meeting is the 21st of April. And don't forget, next week is the Tennessee Airports Conference. Really, the first day is the 24th, but that's really more or less for exhibitors. I think Barge has a night out at Puckett's that you may have received invitation to. Here's the agenda for the 2 days, Tuesday and part of Wednesday. I would, if you can, if you're going to be kind of in and out, the awards lunch at 11:30 would be something I think that you would I'd recommend that you be there for. There's going to be 2 awards, one from, both from Tennessee Aviation Association, one to John Black for his service to the airport, general aviation airports, but then certainly to Rutherford County, and certainly been a great assistance to us at this airport. And then recognition of George Huddleston and his work here, and then on the airports commission. Most of his family, I believe, is coming from out of town for that as well. So it should be a nice time. We've got a good, I think we're up to 275, something like that. The whole exhibit hall is full, so it should be a really well-attended event again. Casino night is going to be sponsored by Nashville International Airport, so it looks like they're going to do a big deal, kind of like they did last year with the derbies. Derby night will do the same with casino night. They'll have a nice event there too. So some good thing. Benson and I will be chirping and yelling at the other airports to pull their load and be bothering and being a pain in the butt to their representatives to try to get some more money to general aviation. Wednesday, Chamber of Commerce is having a lunch here, and Butch Ely will be here, who is the one that kind of sets the budget for Aeronautics Division, so I'll be asking him on the side about that, and also the next appointment to the Aeronautics Commission. So hope to see you guys there.
And I know Chad's keeps y'all updated a lot on what the budget situation is. I went back and watched TDOT's presentation to the transportation groups, and they just didn't even touch on aviation. They didn't care. They went right through it. They gave us extra $1 million, they said, more than they did last year, and they paid no attention to what TAA has been telling them, and they paid no attention to what the director of aeronautics told them that they need in order to keep the budget up to keeping up with what we need. So from Governor Plea's office, it's basically, I'm lame duck, I don't care, the next person can deal with it. And that's basically where we are.
My goodness.
All right, Chad, we've got just a couple of minutes that I would love to do something we hadn't normally done. I'm going to start with Bill, if he doesn't mind. Everybody, take 30 seconds and tell us something that maybe the city's doing, your business is doing, something that you're got a personal accolade on. Just give us something quick.
Personal accolade. Oh, man. Well, there's not any personal accolades, but you just, general information is what you're thinking?
Anything that's on your mind, anything new coming to the city that we might not have heard of?
Well, of course, y'all know Trader Joe's and some of the other things that are happening. We're hoping that Buc-ee's is going to move along a little bit closer to us. We're starting that same budget process that the airport's going through. It's encouraging that, when I listen to some of the other communities and the financial situation that they're in, we've been fortunate that we're in the position that we are. It looks like we're going to have another good year. It's always a challenge to make all of the equations balance, but I think it's going to be good. I'm looking forward personally to spring. Coach baseball, as some of you know, for a long time, and looking forward to. This is my 50th year of coaching Little League. So
Great. That's great.
this will be my 50th year doing it. And there's a lot of young people, including the fire chief, came through my program when he was a 12-year-old.
I guess professionally, I'm glad the industrial real estate market's really picking up, even on the big box stuff. So we're a lot of transacting, a lot of people moving here. Business is good. The personal side, my daughter's 15, just started driving, so please be defensive when you're out there. And my son, he's 21. He's a senior at UT Chattanooga in finance. He'll be he's got probably another semester after this year left, and he'll be coming back to Nashville to be looking for a job, probably in banking or with a REIT or some sort of commercial real estate thing, but,
Great.
so, yeah.
Well, that's good. Anything?
I'm just thankful to be alive. Personally, our son starts captain of grade next week.
Oh, wow.
And now everybody in our family are commercial multi-rated pilots.
Congratulations. One that I'll have to say, we are blessed in this area to have leaders and to have people in places that make decisions to not just sometimes always stifle something. I heard just last week that I think Coffee County got a 180-day moratorium put on passing any new things because they're getting kind of overwhelmed with projects there in the Manchester area. They don't know what to do with it. And that's kind of unfortunate that you have some place that just says, I've got to sit down and do nothing for 6 months to figure that out. So we're blessed, I think, here.
Well, since we're talking about budgets, personally, I've got 3 kids at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So balance the budget over at the Lowry household right now. And then I guess professionally at 12 Stone Health Partners, we're opening 5 new centers this year. And we're going into a new state, Mississippi, so that'll be our 5th state. So that's exciting.
Here. Kelvin?
Just actually had a 50th birthday a few days ago. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Joining up. Cool thing, I sell real estate like Paul, and we're Habitat for Humanity, I'm on that board, and we're trying to buy the Dirt Cheap building and put a huge restore there, so I've been working on that a lot. And also I'm a ruling elder at First Pres, where Bill attends, oldest church in Murfreesboro from 1812, but I became the property chairman, so keeping up with a building that was built after tornado from
1812 was where it
Yeah,
started.
but this location is the tornado that came downtown
The
in the early 1900s, so it's a big challenge and a lot to keep up with, but it's a lot of fun.
As the pastor of the second oldest church in 1820, I don't know if it's second, but it's almost as old as yours. But we are just enjoying a good season, and lots of folks coming. We had 14 new members on Sunday. That was really neat to see, and just continue to be amazed. Our people are engaged in 34 different ministries across the community, and it's over 800 what we call disciples in action who are serving in the community in that way, and that's a gift to just be able to be part of that. I'm thankful for that, of course, for our wonderful community. It's just a great place to live. My family and I moved into our new house finally in the second week of January, I think. It's been a long journey. We lived in a camper for 3.5 months, so I'm glad that it's over and the camper is gone. It's gone. I will never again be in a camper. So that's what's happening. Oh, and personally, Mason and I are finishing up my annual on the Mooney, and I just love doing that work, and it's fun to do owner-assisted annuals. I even injured my finger today with safety gloves.
Chad or Ryan, anything?
Personally, my wife this is her first year as an assistant principal. She's been teaching math at Thurman Francis for 27 years and got the opportunity to be assistant principal and is really loving that. And I have 2 children in college, one at law school at UT. So she is, we kind of have to take care of her emotionally and financially sometimes, but enjoying that. And my second daughter is following in my wife's footsteps and is teaching over at Campus School, doing that program, and will be graduating in December. So hopefully she'll be out getting a job.
It's a big deal.
One of the big moments that I had this weekend is, if anybody knows, my wife is disabled, so we got a dog to train up as her mobility aid. We got her as a little puppy because buying a fully trained one is more expensive than buying a new car. So we've been training with her for over a year now. She finally got her AKC certification as a fully trained service animal.
It's neat.
Is there a graduation ceremony for that, or?
There probably is.
Yeah, well.
All right. I hope God continues to bless us both health-wise and business as well. Thank y'all for tonight.
That's good.
Motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I should-
To adjourn.